Whenever the conversation about AI and jobs comes up, our minds usually jump to places like Silicon Valley, right? Or maybe London. But that's only a tiny slice of the pie. What about, well, pretty much the rest of the world? So let's really get into it, because AI's impact on the workforce in the global south, that's a whole different ballgame. And it's happening as we speak. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter, the big question we're tackling in this explainer. For literally billions of people, is AI going to be a ladder up, a genuine tool for progress, or is it going to be a wall, just another barrier that makes the gap between the world's richest and poorest countries even wider?
Okay, so before we can even begin to answer that, we have to get our boots on the ground, We need to understand the economic soil, so to speak. Because the economies of developing nations are just built differently than high-income countries. And that single fact, it changes everything about how a technology like AI is going to land.
I mean, just look at this comparison. It's like two different worlds. Over here, you've got your high-income economies, mostly formal jobs, solid infrastructure. But then you look over here, and this is the reality for most of the planet. We're talking a massive informal sector, a huge number of young people all looking for jobs, and these stubborn, persistent gaps in just basic digital access.
And to really wrap your head around the scale of this, 61%. That's how many workers on Earth are in the informal economy. Just think about that. We're talking about your local shopkeepers, people who are self-employed, casual day laborers, folks often working without contracts or any kind of safety net.
But the really critical piece of the puzzle here is where these workers are. A staggering 93% of them are in emerging and developing countries. So we're talking about jobs that are not only less stable, but they're also way harder to even track. How do you measure AI's impact when you can't even get a clear picture of the job market to begin with?
All right, now let's add another huge factor into the mix, something called the youth bulge. I mean, get this, in Africa, 60% of the entire population is under the age of 25. Can you imagine the kind of pressure that puts on an economy? They have to create millions and millions of new entry-level jobs year after year after year.
And then layered on top of all of that, you've got the digital divide. We're talking about an estimated 2.2 billion people still being offline, even in a couple of years. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? You can't get the benefits of AI if you can't even get on the internet. So you put all of this together, and this is the incredibly complex reality that AI is walking into. Okay, so with that picture in mind, let's turn to the future. How exactly is AI going to reshape the world of work over the next 10 years? And listen, the narrative isn't just about robots taking all the jobs. It's more subtle. We're looking at 4 major fundamental transformations. So here's the roadmap. First up, we're likely going to see a squeeze on those entry-level knowledge jobs. Second, the way global services work is going to get a major rewire. Third, that gap in productivity between the AI haves and have-nots, that's set to get wider. And finally, number 4, we're going to see the rise of these new hybrid human-AI jobs. All right, let's break each one down.
So, this first transformation, it really starts with what generative AI is already amazing at. Think about it. All those routine, predictable tasks that a junior professional does. Drafting emails, summarizing long documents, basic coding help, first-line customer support. AI can do that stuff, and it's getting better every day. And this leads to a pretty sobering truth. For decades, if you were a young graduate in a place like India or the Philippines, a job in a call center or an outsourcing firm, that was your ticket. It was a reliable pathway into the middle class. But as AI starts to handle the most basic of those tasks, those on-ramps to a better life, they're going to get a lot narrower.
And that leads us right into the second big transformation, the rewiring of global service chains. It's a simple change, but with huge consequences. Back then, a project might have needed, say, 20 people on an offshore team. But now, you can get the same project done with maybe 8 people plus AI. Now, the jobs won't disappear completely, but the growth in those sectors, it's definitely going to slow down.
Now, of course, AI is creating some new jobs too, right? We're seeing roles in data annotation, training the models, moderating content in different languages. But, and this is a big but, a lot of these new jobs are starting to look suspiciously like gig work. They're often low-paid, contract-based, and pretty unstable. There's a real risk here of creating a whole new kind of digital sweatshop.
Okay, let's move on to the third transformation, because this is where all these pieces start to come together into something even bigger, what you might call the Great Productivity Divide. And really, this all comes down to a simple question. Who actually gets to use this stuff?
The World Bank has this great framework for it.
They say to be AI ready, you need what they call the 4 C's. You need connectivity, good internet. You need compute, the raw processing power. You need contextual data, that's local data to make the AI relevant. And you need competencies, a workforce with the right skills. The problem is, many developing countries are playing catch up on at least one of those, if not more.
And this chart, wow. It just shows you the gap between potential and reality so clearly. A study in Latin America found that there are 17 million jobs that could be improved with AI. That's amazing. But half of them, a full 50%, are held by people who don't have the digital access or live in places with the right infrastructure to even use it. The potential is massive, but reality is holding it back.
But look, it's not all doom and gloom. Not at all. And that brings us to the forced transformation, which honestly paints a much more hopeful picture. This is the future where AI doesn't just replace people, but it actually works with them, creating these new kinds of hybrid jobs.
Just imagine how this could work. In a hospital, an AI could scan thousands of X-rays and flag something suspicious, but it's still the doctor who makes the final call and talks to the patient. Or in farming, an AI on a phone could spot a crop disease, but it's the farmer, using their years of local knowledge, who decides on the best treatment. You see the pattern? The human role moves up a level, to judgment, to wisdom, to the human touch.
So there's actually a cool economic term for this. It's called labor complementarity. It's a fancy term, but it's a simple and powerful idea. Humans plus machines, working together, can achieve way more than either could on their own. Our jobs don't just vanish, they evolve. We stop being players in the orchestra and become the conductors.
So what does this mean for skills, for what we teach our kids? Well, memorizing facts is basically obsolete. The real value, the new premium, is on all the stuff that AI is terrible at. We're talking about critical and creative thinking, data literacy, social and emotional intelligence, and maybe the most important one of all, just being adaptable and ready to learn your whole life. Which brings us to the most important point of this entire conversation. Seriously, none of this is set in stone. The future isn't something that just happens to us. The future of work in the global south is going to be a direct result of the choices, the policy decisions that leaders and governments make, like today.
And look, there's a pretty clear playbook here. It starts with investing huge amounts in digital infrastructure, internet for everyone. It means totally revamping education to focus on those human-centric skills we just talked about. It means encouraging companies to use AI to augment their workers, not just cut costs by replacing them. And crucially, it means building up homegrown AI, not just being a consumer of tech from other countries.
So when you strip it all away, it really comes down to a choice between two very different futures. There's the passive path, where we just let things happen and we watch inequality get worse and jobs stagnate. Or there's the proactive path, where we choose to invest in our people, in our infrastructure, and build a future with inclusive growth and our own innovation.
The technology is already here, and honestly, it's moving at a speed that's hard to comprehend. The next 10 years, this is the critical window. This is the choice point. And so the real question isn't, what will AI do to us? The question we have to answer is, what are we going to do with AI? Which future are we going to build?